Well, hello everyone. Thank you for coming today. My name's Josh. You can see a little bit about me here on the slide. I work at Expium. I'm a personal development coach here and Safe Scrum Master, Myers-Briggs certified facilitator. I'm also kind of a team building consultant. Uh, I work with teams that want to develop or increase their productivity through kind of relational or social techniques. I'm also a game master, which we'll get into a little bit later in this, but essentially it's the use of games and role play to help teams sort of bond. It's also just kind of a fun thing that we do. So that's who I am. I want to thank you for coming. For you, this webinar today is designed to basically, I'm here to make your meetings more exciting, which, probably shouldn't be that hard, knowing how meetings usually go. But really, I'm here to teach you the value of saying something uncomfortable, something that another team member might disagree with, and how by doing so, you will have the opportunity to produce better results on your team. Basically, the best ideas will rise to the top through debate and through interrogation. And you will discover a kind of alignment on your team that wouldn't have been possible if everyone had simply withheld their disagreements from each other. So that is the point of this. Before I go any further, though, I do want to provide you some information about who we are as a company, as Expium, and give you a sense of what we do out in the world so that you know what this is all about and kind of who I work with and why we're doing this. So we at Expium are a platinum solution partner with Atlassian. Atlassian creates products like Jira and Trello, of course. And what that means, being a platinum solution partner, is that we partner with Atlassian to help enable users with their products. We do that by providing a series of services from training to consulting and a couple of other solutions. So the first thing that we do is trainings. So we have Jira Bootcamp, which is a flagship course that's a 3-day deep dive into Jira. And it's really perfect for Jira admins or super users. The idea being we can really tell you the ins and outs of how it works and what can be possible for you and your team. We also have boot camps for Confluence and Jira Service Management. And what I'm particularly excited about is that we now offer workshops geared towards helping your teams work better together. I'll talk about those later. Essentially, though, Expium offers consulting across the entire Atlassian suite of products for a wide range of organizations, both large and small, to help you get the most out of your work organization. Also, regarding the solutions that we provide, it's important to note that we have an entire team of full stack developers who can create custom software. So if something doesn't exist yet, we can build it. All right. So with all that said, where does conflict fit into that picture? Why does conflict fit in with Jira services or tools? How does it matter? I think at the end of the day, we're all humans using these tools, and we have different opinions about how they can be used and run, as well as opinions about the work we're doing outside of our work management with Jira. So we became particularly interested in this as a company during the pandemic. We began to develop sort of a team building and enablement or training arm internally because we could sense as the pandemic was happening that our culture was in distress. So this is our office. This is the XPM office in Missouri, St. Louis, Missouri. And you can see it's a beautiful, lovely day there. And this office for us it's a really important space. We've created a culture where it's very easy for people to converse with each other. We're a small enough company that everyone gets lunch together and has the opportunity to talk and share ideas, both professionally and just like as people. It's kind of essential to who we are. And when the pandemic hit, this all went away. And people started working remotely, and we found folks being isolated from each other. Ideas were not being shared. There was kind of a big slowdown in terms of like exchange of information, and some relationships, especially with people who could work more independently, just started to drift farther and farther away. and folks that you would have seen every day in the office, all of a sudden it had been 3 months and there was no contact with them. And I know we were not alone in that. That was kind of something that was happening across the world with this whole remote revolution. Um, so without any of that, we started to wonder, like, how can we create a culture here, given that this is happening? I mean, we were onboarding new people and they had never experienced what our culture was. So what sort of was happening organically or naturally when we were all together stopped taking place, and all of a sudden people didn't even get what it really meant to be working there. And that was really disheartening from the people who have worked there a long time and knew what it meant to be an employee of Expium, to be in a collaborative and empathetic and purpose-driven environment. So that was when we began our enablement program, which was a very intentional training created by the incredible Brian Darr, one of our other consultants here. And we got very intentional about our culture, and we started to do some research into what we can do to improve teams and teamwork for ourselves, and then later on for our customers. So I want to talk about the 5 dysfunctions of a team, which is the book that we turned to by Patrick Lencioni and his theory on productivity, teamwork, what it takes to have a good team on a more human level, not just about systems and organization, but about the interpersonal things that can get in the way, and what he describes as the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Now, I'm going to be going through this theory, and I want to make it clear for everyone listening. I don't want this to be like other webinars that you've been to in the past, where you're just sort of asked to like take things at face value or take my word for it. I would prefer that if something that I'm saying is disagreeable to you or doesn't feel like it makes sense in some way, or you can think of a case where this doesn't apply, to put in the chat in the Q&A your yeah, but, and how about there, so that we can address it at the Q&A at the end. I'm really going to be talking about the application of this theory. And if you are an intelligent person who is engaged with this, I think you'll probably have questions. And just know that anything you put in the Q&A is totally private. So only I will see it. But as this stuff is coming up and you're interrogating it in your own mind, please let us know. That's the kind of stuff that moves the conversation forward. And of course, if you don't want to do that, that's totally fine. You know, in many cases, we've just met. So building trust is important. Speaking of that, so that is the first dysfunction here. So I'll quickly go through these. We're going to be focusing on conflict here, which is the second one in the theory. But I want to make sure that you at least have a broad overview of what these different things are. So the first dysfunction is an absence of trust, which essentially means that people don't trust each other to have their best interests. They don't believe that they can be open with each other. They need to check or double check. And a lot of us exist in an agile environment now where having a self-directed team inherently has a lot of trust in it. It's moving away from an old model. But nonetheless, we're people, and sometimes we might not think that someone has our best interests at heart. And we might not know people very well. So an absence of trust can be devastating to an organization. We actually have another webinar on that, but anyway. Next is fear of conflict, being afraid of engaging with conflict for fear of the consequences. Then we have a lack of commitment, which is that people are unable to commit to a certain course of action. So it's sort of, it can spiral out, or different people might have different ideas of what they want to do. The team is unable to commit or align in a unified way. That's what a lack of commitment really looks like, and might look like on your team if you're experiencing that. This feeling of people don't quite agree, but maybe they're going through the motions. There's not a lot of motivation in it. They don't know why they're doing something. That's a lack of commitment. Avoidance of accountability is a really difficult one. That is if someone is not kind of, once commitment has been established and everyone said that they want to do something, if we might not want to hold each other accountable if someone does something wrong or does something off the path, it can be uncomfortable to engage in that conversation. So we avoid holding people accountable and go, oh no, they'll be fine. We'll figure it out later. And then it never gets addressed. Last one is the inattention to results, which is simply not being aware of whether or not you're hitting your numbers or your targets and thinking, well, it feels good. It feels like we're doing good work, versus actually looking at, well, how much of our product did we want to sell? What date did we say we would get this program out by? And that can be a problem for a team where you think you're making progress, but it's not directed towards a goal. So that's a broad overview of the theory. I think there's a lot to get out of the book itself in terms of reading it, and I love going deeper and referencing back to points in this theory because it's very useful and often very applicable with different teams that I work with. And it's easy enough to notice when one of these things are happening if you know what to look for. And then there are solutions to kind of address each one. It is a pyramid here because that is intentional, because each one does build on the next one. With trust, you can have conflict. And I think that's one of the key things for today, is that foundation of trust you want to have there, because that is what lets us engage in conflict. And I'll talk about why a little bit more going forward. But the long and short of it is, when you know that someone has your best interests at heart and they say something that's uncomfortable or they disagree with you, then you can trust they're not coming from a place of wanting to undermine you or take you out or challenge your authority. They're not trying to shoot you down, but rather they are someone who genuinely has the best interests of the team and thus you at heart. So that's how trust plays into that. All right. So today we're going to talk about the fear of conflict. I want to start here by defining what I mean by conflict for you. So conflict is not war. It's not a fist fight. It's not something that is escalated to the point of violence or a shouting match between people. Conflict can happen between two people who like each other, and it's simply an anxious situation that needs to be resolved. Something where they're both unsure about how to proceed and they might have differing opinions, and it has not yet been resolved. This is foundational in the use or in the production of movies. Movies are based on conflict, on dilemmas that the characters are going through that are anxious and uncertain, where we don't know how they're going to play out. So, I mean, that's why we pay attention at a movie, because we want to see how it's gonna go. And let's take an example here. So I'm going to use Star Wars because today is May the 4th, for those who are not keyed up on that. So May the 4th be with you. And I want to talk about the Star Wars movie. So in this movie, the anxious situation is that the Empire is oppressing the galaxy. I mean, and Luke, who at the beginning is simply like living his life in this oppressive society, his home is destroyed. And then he finds himself in this dilemma. What should he do now with his life? Now that the Empire has come into his life and ruined the one that he had, and he's discovered this new purpose with his father's lightsaber, who his father once was, this Jedi. And through the course of the movie, he goes and questions whether or not he knows how to use the Force, whether or not this path is the right one, grappling with his own feeling of powerlessness to affect a galaxy or a change. And it's by the end of the movie that we see his resolution that he really is someone who's committed to the rebellion and ultimately can touch into the Force and destroys the Death Star. And then the situation's resolved and the movie's over. Great. Awesome. Wow. I was not expecting to do a recap of Star Wars this morning when I woke up, but here we are. So an anxious situation in a movie might exist between two people. It might exist against a person versus nature, like in Jaws, or it might be an internal struggle, but always there is something at stake in that. There's someone's personal happiness or whether or not they're going to find love. But for you, in your life, I want to make this very relevant to you in the meetings that you do, because in your life, the anxious thing that might be at stake is the success of your product, or it might be your customers' faith in your brand, or it might be that a tool functions properly and the way that it was intended to, or in the best way possible. And that is what is at stake for you when you're going into a meeting to discuss the next features you're going to work on from your backlog, or the next actions you want to take as you're building up your backlog, or the actions you want to take going forward with your team. It's not a small thing. And if you have a room of intelligent people, they're all going to have different opinions about the best way to do that. And certainly part of being a scrum master is being able to facilitate those conversations well so that those opinions get aired. But it can be the job of any leader on the team to ensure that that's all heard. The stakes that exist for you on your team are why you need to have conflict, because there's not room to make bad decisions. You need to be able to make the best one that you can. You need for this product to succeed. There's an investment. Bad decisions are going to have consequences over time. You might feel that there are some things that need to be discussed because you actually know what is at stake for your team. I don't know what that is for you, but you certainly know it. And open conflict and disagreement is what gets the best results, because you're just debating the merits of the different viewpoints. But we'll talk a little bit about that later. So we talked about movies, how the conflict is what hooks us and what gets us. And if that movie is done well, the conflict is presented right at the beginning. Within the first 10 minutes of the movie, you know what it's about, what the thing is that's at stake. Money, but usually, ideally, the first 10. So what you can do in your meetings is present the conflict that your team is dealing with right at the beginning. You know what the issues that your team is dealing with are. You know what the stakes are. You can tell them why something matters, that it be discussed, and how it will affect the future of your team. So what you want to do is, at the top of your meeting, if you're leading it or organizing it, present the stakes to your team. Explain to them the danger of making a bad decision and why it's important to come to the best decisions, why it matters for the future of your team, for your product, for your company, whatever is actually at stake for you guys to work together and establish this. It might be that there's a new initiative that you really believe in, and if it's not given the resources, it's going to fail, or it's going to sort of peter off into nothing. Maybe you need another team to be transparent about their practices, because there's no way for you to get in there and understand how to help them or work with them if that's not open. These are all anxious situations that might exist in a company. And frankly, I don't need to tell you what might keep you up at night about the future of what you're doing. But I will here give an example of one. So the book that I mentioned earlier, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, is really great because it presents these dysfunctions not just as a model, but in a story. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is actually, it's like a fiction book. And it centers around an executive team in a fictional company in Silicon Valley that is really dysfunctional. The executives don't get along, they withhold information from each other, the company is not doing very well. And the dramatic conflict of the book is whether or not a new CEO named Catherine is going to be able to bring this team together, and whether or not she's going to be able to actually resolve the problems that exist on the team. And so I'm going to read you a quote from the book that she presents the team at their first offsite together. It's been difficult to get to the team to this point. A lot of them have said this is a waste of time, or they don't want to do it. They don't know why they're there yet. And you can kind of imagine that morning as she's walking into the boardroom with all these sort of like bored and questioning faces. Some people more questioning than others, some people really hoping that this goes well. And she says this to the team: We have a more experienced and talented executive team than any of our competitors. We have more cash than they do. Thanks to Martin and his team, we have better core technology. And we have a more powerful board of directors. Yet, in spite of all of that, we are behind two of our competitors in terms of both revenue and customer growth. Can anyone here tell me why that is? Silence. She uses this to open up a very productive discussion about the team's behaviors and the dysfunctions that are happening around them, where people have to be honest and genuinely say their opinions about their colleagues and the teamwork that they have. And she kind of leads them through this whole discussion. It is riveting to read because many people do not agree with her or this point. And she's willing to take a stand to move the team in the direction that she sees as best for it. Teams that can participate in this kind of an open and passionate debate will find that they are addressing issues that otherwise would go unaddressed, things that are critical that could alter the course of their future and that will actually determine what they do in their daily lives. The discussions that we have at meetings often determine what we're going to work on for the next week, 2 weeks, month, 3 months, if it's a PI planning. These discussions are very relevant, and if they feel boring, they're not being presented well. It's as though the decisions were already made before the meeting happened, or these questions are not just being brought up, but most often it's that people are afraid to get into conflict with each other and afraid to say when they disagree. As I said, these are relevant. It's about whether or not often you can put bread on the table. It might affect the course of your job. And if we are engaged also, don't you think that we're going to make better decisions? If we get everybody's opinions and ideas out on the table, aren't we going to consider points that in our own mind we wouldn't have thought of otherwise? We are drawn to the stories like movies and film because of the conflict that exists within it. If a meeting contains no conflict, then no one will be engaged. However, if it does, then you will see your people lean in as though they were at a movie, but the movie is their own lives. It's all relevant to what they're doing. So if this is presented well, you will find your team engaged and offering their solutions. They'll know why it matters. Of course, stoking the flames of conflict can all come crashing down if you do not have trust between team members. I want to take a look here at what trust looks like. A lack of trust looks like. All right, so this is not the prettiest slide, but hopefully it gets my point across. It's useful if you want to screenshot it throughout, but at any rate, on the right-hand side, we have unhealthy and destructive conflict. So what that can look like if it's happening, if there's a lack of trust, is people who are unwilling to be seen in the wrong or unwilling to admit their shortcomings. If you have someone who is in denial about that, it may be very difficult to have a productive conflict. They will resist it. Why they resist it, there can be many reasons for that, from upbringing to personality, to just general awareness and development in life. But people may be unwilling to be seen as wrong and take it very personally and become very hurt if they were to be seen as wrong. So often what that means is they won't ever admit shortcomings. They'll come off as invulnerable in some way. There's also going to be generally a focus on the self and individual performance. Like, if it's working for me, why should I care about the rest of you? And some of the key things that you'll notice when a conflict is unproductive is a feeling of anger, a feeling of annoyance at others, stress, possibly reactivity and blame, looking to blame others for why things are going wrong. People might shut down, they might engage in power struggles. All these things are signs of unhealthy conflict, and that's because in unhealthy conflict, there's more of a desire to win over the other person and not a genuine desire to understand someone else's viewpoint and incorporate it, interrogate it. It's not about the ideas, but I'll say why I think this happens. If two people are engaged in a meeting or a discussion and someone tells you that your idea is wrong, that might hurt. You might feel stressed if that comes at you. There might be a defensiveness that starts to come up as you want to justify your viewpoint and tell them that you're not wrong. Um, in a situation where there is a basis of trust, you can know that that person on the other side who's talking with you, who's questioning what you're doing, has good intentions and has your best interests at heart. We often get into conflicts with our spouses or people that we're very close to, but when we trust them, we know that they're not bringing these things up to cause us anguish, to put us down, but rather they're there to share their viewpoint and their difference of opinion. And often they have very valid points to make, no matter how that might make us feel. It is a willingness to reconsider our positions when we know that we can trust someone that allows the ideological debate to be productive. Basically, can the decision that you're making or the point that you have hold up under the application of interrogation, reasoning, and logic from all the individuals of the team? When you really trust someone, you know that it's not a personal attack, but a criticism of the idea. And often we can hear hard truths and let our guard down because we trust people. If we don't, and we can't let our walls down, we won't be able to do this, and our conversations will often be superficial and people will not be able to voice all of their opinions. And it will result, whenever disagreements do come up, because they will inevitably come up, it will result in this sort of unhealthy conflict where at the very least, people are simply shutting down and going along with the program. Worse though, you have stress and reactivity and people complaining at the water cooler because their opinion wasn't heard. Or they disagree with the direction the team is going in. As a manager and a leader, this is a huge opportunity to be able to leverage your team for their insights and their productivity. So, yes, ensure a basis of trust. This is kind of the second tool. It's actually a fairly big topic. We have another webinar. If you go on the Expium YouTube playlist, you can find our trust webinar there, and we go into this stuff in some detail there, where we talk about different methods for creating and sussing out a background of trust on a team, different tools and strategies that you can take. And often it just comes down to having open conversations with people. But a team with a healthy amount of trust can take these more difficult conversations, which ultimately results in a much more productive thing. Now, for you, you might not be sure where your team falls or who you feel this trust exists with or not. But testing the waters and seeing how disagreements are handled on the team is a key first step to sort of find out what's going on. Kind of self-awareness is often the first step. And you can put that into play kind of right away. So that is what I want to share on that one. So as a manager, you generally will want your team to speak up and feel a sense of buy-in to whatever decision that the team makes. If a manager is using authority to get their ideas through, it can cost the team. Like doing it just because I say so might cost the team A, their ideas, but B, also a sense of buy-in. Um, Remarkably, I have found that when people can air their disagreements with each other, they're much more comfortable with going in a direction that isn't what they originally thought or intended. If people feel that their perspective has been heard and incorporated and not simply rebuffed or defended against, um, that they're much more likely to commit and fall behind the leader and know that this is the right thing to do. That's a little bit on the third dysfunction of commitment, but these two play a role. And that's why without productive conflict, you can't really have commitment, wholehearted commitment from team members. All right, we'll move on. So this is number 3, mine for conflict. Uh, Essentially, speak up when something is unspoken on a team and get to the bottom of things. So if, for example, you don't fully understand how a process works within the company and you want to meet with someone and they feel guarded about it for some reason, being able to dig for what is actually going on will serve you, even if it's uncomfortable and you might not know why that person is trying to keep you out or protect whatever they're doing. Mining for conflict is important because it helps you understand why another person might disagree with something. And often as people, we can sense when that disagreement is there, when there's sort of something in the air. Um, and it can often be as simple as asking, hey, why don't you think this is the right path? But doing so, you're not doing so to kind of submit to their viewpoint, but rather to inquire and interrogate the viewpoint and come to a place of understanding about where they're going from. So with digging up buried conflict, the key tool there is to ask questions. If there is something that you don't know or that seems ambiguous or that you're not sure you understand the motivation behind, or uh, if you're, I mean, ask a question, but, or if you're sensing that not everyone on the team has aired their viewpoints, be sure to check in. And if you sense that someone might not have aired their viewpoints because they're uncomfortable in a public forum, um, check in with them one-on-one and jump in another way. Not everyone feels totally comfortable speaking up in front of a group, and you might be missing some incredible contributions from your more introverted members if you're not taking the time to give them kind of the space and the safety to talk with you one-on-one. I think that is a genuine sign of trust when someone brings you a heated disagreement or feeling of that this isn't the right thing to do. It shows you that they can trust you to hear what they have to say. Does that mean that you're always going to go with them? No. You might have a very good reason for what you're doing. Um, but doing so will A, help that person be bought in and fully committed to the team. And B, if you do that over time, often enough, they will simply learn to trust you. And a lot of those feelings will go away. So while you might be thinking like, oh God, I don't want to have to do that for everyone who comes to me. Like I can't explain every decision that I have. Hopefully you won't have to. Um, but if someone does do that, know that with just a couple applications of a genuine conversation, they will come to understand and trust your leadership and your decision-making abilities implicitly. Um, yeah, God, it's a lot of stuff. Hopefully this is useful for you guys. Definitely let us know in the Q&A session if this is useful, if you have any questions. I would really encourage that. I'm not checking it actively right now, but I'll be checking it later on. Um, and to go into the very fourth thing that I want to say about this is definitely validate people when they do bring up an issue or a disagreement, whether that's publicly or in private, and you see your team engaging with that. Tell them that that's what you're looking for, because it is. You do want them to debate these ideas. You do want them to have this productive discussion, because at the end of it, they're going to come to a better result. Frequently as Scrum Masters, you're the facilitator. And you want to be in a place of facilitating these kinds of discussions. It can be really uncomfortable as a person to bring up these things, and we might, if a team member that does that, they might feel nervous or they might even feel a little guilty for bringing up a disagreement. As a scrum master or a team manager, simply telling them, hey, what you're doing, that's exactly what I want. Please keep on doing that. Go ahead, go for it. I know we're all adults, but it can feel like a relief when someone kind of validates us and tells us that we're on the right track, because conflict is uncomfortable. And nobody wants to do something that's going to skew the team in a bad direction in a social way. So validating people is huge. Yeah, I've been scared in the past that clients are going to laugh at me when I tell them to do that, but I am really happy to say that they often seem to be relieved, and it helps the discussion. Yeah, I found that by and large, people do want to treat each other well, and they want to make the best product that they can, and hopefully they can do both. Really, ideally, with trust and open conflict, you're very much on your way to being able to do both of those things. Yeah, the point for you as a leader is just to make a safe place for them to fail. I think about that a lot with clients. Just make it okay for them to try things and then pick it up and do it again, and let them learn and let them know they're doing a good job. People often need that kind of support. Not everyone, but many people do, and it'll help you create an environment of ease where conflict can even be a fun and enjoyable process to engage in. Debate can truly be a satisfying and riveting experience, especially when people trust each other. It's exciting, it's zesty. It might have people look forward to meetings. So yeah, and throughout my career, I mean, the leaders that I respect the most are the ones who make it safe to come to them and to have these kinds of disagreements. All right. Well, I do want to say, if you want to go deeper with me on any of that stuff in terms of conflict or coaching on your team, coaching Scrum Masters is something that I do, as well as just coaching teams. So if this is something that you want to discuss, on a deeper level, please set that up. We'll have some links there for you to book a discovery call with us and be able to explore that. Give me 1 second. All right. So I want to talk about a safe place to practice conflict. We here at Expium have actually devised a safe place to practice conflict and other soft skills for our employees. It's something that we do with different teams or between teams on an ongoing basis. We do it fully virtually, and it's been really useful. We actually believe that these skills, all of these soft skills, are really important when dealing with clients and dealing with our partners and dealing with other internal colleagues. So we want to make sure that there's a place for people to practice conflict, trust, how to make each other feel safe, commitment, all that stuff, and do it in a way that's fun, but is a kind of like serious fun. It's play, but with some stakes. We're also very clear that the lack of these skills creates misunderstandings. It walls people off, and it often can cause bottlenecks. If people aren't bringing things up, that's a bottleneck. Just as much as a workflow bottleneck exists, fear of conflict is definitely a bottleneck at your organization. I guarantee it. So our low stakes environment for practicing is Dungeons and Dragons. Yes, you heard it right here. Just like the new movie that came out, we use Dungeons and Dragons as a way for people to play. This is kind of the game master thing that I was talking about earlier. This is something we've been doing internally, but we now are offering externally for clients who are interested. So what is it? Why does it work? How is this relevant at all to what we've talked about so far? Well, Dungeons and Dragons is a board game, but it's not like other board games that you play. It's much more conversational and free form. The rules are less strict and less bounded than other board games. It's very much kind of playing pretend or an imaginary thing. Role play is kind of a key aspect of it. But you could think of like when you were a kid and you were on the school playground and kind of imagining stories. Not to say there aren't rules, but all the rules that go into this kind of heroic adventure game are often tied to moving the story forward in some way and actually driving up dramatic conflict. A lot of the rules are there to get people to lean in, to get people excited, to get people to have to make difficult decisions. And because it's an open-ended game where there's not just these bounded rules, you have a lot more freedom than in other places to explore, to experiment, and to try different approaches. The way the game is structured is there are 6 players, 4 to 6 players, and a game master. And the game master is in charge of the antagonists. They're in charge of kind of narrating the world into existence, and they're in charge of kind of adjudicating the rules. And each of the 6 players is in charge of a single character, kind of like the one on this page with the shield and the black hair and everything. And that character is their avatar in the story, and they decide what their character's name is, what their background is, what their specialties are, and who they are as a quote unquote person. Um, in that way, it's a very creative exercise, and people often get some joy out of building a character, and they'll put some parts of themselves in the character, which is cool. There's a little bit of like wish fulfillment and stuff like that that can happen. But at the end of the day, they're in charge of that character and writing that character's history. And then the group goes on adventures, and really the job of the game master is to create an interesting adventure or story for them all to go on. But it's a storytelling game. It's call and response. So using this picture as an example, the dungeon master would, or the game master would, traditionally they're called dungeon masters, but I like game master a little better. The game master will describe, all right, you enter the crypt. You can see the stone walls all around you. You can feel the cool air in here. And you hear this distant footfall down a long corridor behind a column. And you hear a growl, something low that echoes through the halls and reverberates. The 6 of you hear something coming. What do you do? And with that, the players then get to act. It's open-ended, what they can do. They can't just do anything. It is still kind of bounded by the logic of a story. And the game is best when it has internal consistency. That's kind of part of the seriousness of the fun. Like everyone's sort of working to uphold this story to make sure it's believable together. Although some players do love to test the boundaries of it, and they are more than welcome to try. But the story is like a choose your own adventure book, essentially. So in a choose your own adventure book, you can turn to page 83 to see what happens if you charge towards the dragon, weapons drawn, and you can turn to page 102 to see what happens if everybody kind of hides and waits for the massive creature to come into the room, and then they surprise them, and then you can turn to those 2 pages and see what happens. However, in this game, your choices are only limited by the game master's imagination. That's me. So whatever you say you want to do, I'll then take that and use that as material to craft what happens next. So if you all told me as a group, all right, we're going to hide and wait for the thing to come in, I would say like, all right, great. The footfalls get louder and louder, and all of a sudden this reddish glow begins to come down the corridor. You feel your heart racing as this creature moves in, and then into your view comes this red scaled dragon with orange eyes and big teeth as it growls and walks down the corridor. It sniffs in the air. What is that I smell? And then from there, you would tell me what you do next. And so it's kind of a call and response thing where everyone's using their imaginations to build it up. So this is all totally imaginary, but often the feelings are real. We have people report feeling kind of an adrenaline rush as they do it. Um, and sometimes sadness if things don't go well, or joy and excitement at having won or overcome the dragon. You can get this kind of like real, genuine feeling of excitement at the table for it. Really, there is nothing better, in my opinion, than the whirlwind of laughter and creativity that results from playing this. People start to be inventive across the table as they realize they have a lot of choices to make. And they start to trust their instincts. They'll surprise themselves with their contributions. And all the while, everyone's getting more invested in the story. We're building up this story and it starts to take on some importance. The stakes start to come out in the story and everyone begins to care. And just to get to that point often requires a real show of courage and trust to kind of play with everyone. There's this great quote that I've read in the past about like a dog and how it's the dog showing its belly to you and showing that it wants to play with you, that you could hurt it, um, that actually makes the play exciting and lets you know that there's trust established in that relationship. So play is a great thing just to build trust, period. Um, However, on top of that, with that established, you can start to move into conflict as players have different ideas of how they want to approach the dragon or whatever situation is kind of presented throughout the story. Um, so let's see here. And I do a lot of what I'm preaching here in conflict inside of these stories. So presenting the conflict up front. I'll give you an example from one of our tales here. Um, so I'll give you a sec to take this in. This is kind of a jungle here um, on the coast of some imaginary world. This is a different kind of setting. We're out of the dragon lair. We're moving into a different story here. But I'll present the conflict very early. So we have a story that centers around 6 people who are of a mercenary company, kind of like the Roman Legion a little bit, kind of like a high fantasy mercenary company. The Second Son, if you were into Game of Thrones, was one of these. But anyway, they're a mercenary group and they have landed on this jungle continent that has largely been unexplored by their people. They come from some foreign city. And you play a team of soldiers in that company. And the goal of the company is to gain wealth here. It is to make a name for ourselves here. So the very first scene that I introduced them with, they're all called into the office of the high commander of the forces here on this continent. She's kind of a woman with like blonde, close cropped hair. She's very serious. She's sitting at like a big desk with all sorts of maps and things like that. And again, this is all imaginary, but I describe it as though it's real. And she says to the group, "Do any of you know why we're here?" And I give the players a chance to respond. And then she says, "Okay, well, we are here to make money. I don't want any of you to have any illusions of why this company exists and why we've landed on this continent. If we are not making money and showing a return on the investment that our leaders put in on us back in the city back home, then this venture will cease to exist. And likely many of you will end up somewhere else, possibly somewhere worse, or maybe we'll be disbanded or discredited. But I, for one, want to make sure that we are seen as a success and are given the best opportunities here." Is that clear? And then she says, "About a year ago, we had a commander go up the river in the middle of the jungle. He took with him a large number of troops, and there was supposed to be evidence of diamonds up there. He has so far shown no evidence that he's located anything. And when he's been called back to base to report, he says he's too busy and sends missives that he needs more troops and more resources. I don't want to give him any of those things until I find out what's actually going on and why he is dropping the ball. So your job is to head up the river and find out what is going on with Commander Cross. And if you can do something about it, there will be a reward in it for you. So that's the conflict that you as the player are presented with. And it's awesome. It's a really cool high stakes scenario. And immediately, the thing that I see teams do as soon as she's presented that information is begin to ask questions and interrogate, try and figure out everything they can about this commander, who he was, how many troops he got set up, what evidence is there, what do we know about where he is, and all sorts of other details of this. They start to piece together the picture and it becomes a discussion. And then they debate in and of themselves, the team does, what they want to do, how they want to approach the situation. It's very open-ended. And that lets people practice having conflict and disagreement where the stakes will feel real, but they're not the actual stakes of life together. So I just wanted to share that all with you because it's a new super awesome service that we have, and it's really engaging and fun. Like, kind of on top of the fact that it builds lots of these great skills for folks, it's deeply enjoyable and meaningful often. I find that when people are focused on it, they can come out of their shells, they can start to show more of who they are, and you can tell a really exciting story together. So that's that, and it's based on this foundation of experiential learning, which we believe in here at Expium in all of our consulting, not just here. Like whenever we're coaching people around Jira or managing their instance or running their agile teams, we'll often give advice and then watch and let them practice. Experiential learning means you get to experience and practice things and then come back and reflect on it and digest and do your best to kind of work from that, and then jump back in and then come back and reflect. And you go through that process. That's what retros are for at the end of every 2-week sprint, is to kind of like look and reflect at what did we do, how well did it work. And it's one of the best ways that we as human beings can learn, I believe. It's how we learn to walk, it's how we learn to talk, it's how we learn to kiss, it's how we learn to work in an office, and it's how we learn to dance salsa. It's often by do, learn and reflect, and try again. So we build that same philosophy into these games and in the coaching that goes into it. So it's both fun and great for development. This is how it works. If you do want to book a package, you'll schedule your sessions. We'll have a link that we'll put out for that if you want to book any sessions with us. Players then receive their packages. We have these awesome packages that we send out that are full of snacks and dice and other things that are kind of needed for the play of the game, but they're these really cute little packages. And then when we actually show up, it's going to be introductions of the different folks. I'll go over the mechanics and how play works. We'll set up a working agreement to make sure everyone's safe. You know, it's an imaginary game. There's a lot of stuff we can do, but there's also things that we should not do, and it's good to have boundaries. And then I introduce them to the plot and the story and get them invested and interested. They'll build characters to fit into the story, and then we'll jump in and we'll do sessions. So you know, we have 3 different offerings for session lengths. This here indicates kind of our full package, which is 3 sessions. And each one has a character exercise you play, and then at the end there's a retrospective on how it went. But the other offerings we have a single day one, so like a single half day one, that's 4 hours, where a lot of this is about how long the story or how meaty the adventure is that you guys are going to jump into. So the shorter ones will often have a less meaty story with kind of like less interesting conflict and all that. Not to say it still won't be interesting, but it'll just be more of an episode rather than a season, if that makes sense. And then our smallest thing is actually a free offering that we have, which is a 1-hour session that you can book with us and your team, kind of a lunch and learn, where they do get to, we talk a little bit about what it is, but mostly I give everyone the opportunity to play, to try it on, and to do it in a very kind of small story that people can try out, just to see if they like this whole role play thing, if it's fun, and if there's something to get out of it. Then lastly, with whatever level of stuff we do, I'll have a retrospective with the team lead and we'll talk about recommendations, kind of what I've observed, and I'll often be referencing the 5 dysfunctions of a team to make sure that you're feeling like there's something that you can fall back on and ways that you can learn to improve your team's cohesion or what have you through what we've done together. All right, and that's it. Expium does training, consulting, and custom development. We're really proud of our products. Please check out our website at expium.com. We also have an upcoming webinars and classes, Jira Service Management for Bootcamp, how to do a successful Atlassian cloud migration, which is a huge undertaking, but can be very fruitful for your companies. We have success stories over wine for Jira Align and Wine, for those of you who are interested in bringing Jira Align into your company, and want to learn more with a free bottle of wine. It's pretty sweet. And I will be having a Creating a Foundation of Trust Tools and Strategies on May 11th, if anyone wants to show up and learn more about that. All right, let's see if there are any questions today. All right, this is a great one. So I've got one here from Andrew Berg. Thank you, Andrew. I think with remote work, sometimes someone's point comes off different than how it was intended because we lose the nuance of body language of speaking to them in person. To combat this, we can frame our perspective before trying to tell someone the reason why we're making the decision. Interesting. We can combat this. We can frame our perspective before trying to tell someone the reason why we are making our decision. By frame, I mean explain the context that you are viewing this conflict in. That's great. Yeah, I think that's really helpful, and it sounds like it's something that you've managed to leverage on your team. So I think what you're saying is that by saying the point of this conflict or kind of the boundaries of it, like where we can and can't go and why we're having it, is often more important than just backing up or defending a reason for your viewpoint. And I think that's great because it sets the field for the conflict. It lets everyone know kind of what the rules of engagement are, what the stakes are, a little bit more clearly than simply going back and forth and defending that. Thank you, Andrew. It's really great. All right, let's see if we have anything else here. Oh, awesome. So we actually have a prize winner today. Hey, check you out. Thank you everyone for attending. So our giveaway today is a free team building experience for you and up to 5 additional team members. It can be at either the hour-long level or the like half-day level, so kind of the 1 hour or the 4 hour. And we will put a link to the curriculum for the games in the chat. And so the winner will get a box of snacks sent to each of your attendees to sustain them on your journey throughout the story. And the winner of our game today is Andrew Berg. Andrew, thank you so much. If you would email kylie.braun at expium.com, you will receive your prize, and congratulations. And that email is there in the chat, so feel free to reach out to her. All right, let's see if there's anything else. You're welcome, Andrew. Yeah, happy to have you. It'll be exciting. I hope that we can get that together. I would love to do that. So that's it. Thank you all for participating and for joining in on this. This has been a wonderful discussion, and I appreciate the thoughtful comments and questions. And with that, we're going to wrap it up for the day. Thank you for attending, and please do let us know if you can do anything. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. This is some of my favorite stuff to talk about, and I'm always just happy to make more friends. So with that, thank you, everyone, and we will see you for the next webinar.